Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt.
With me today is abundance teacher and money coach, Jodie Lynn Craven.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
And Jodie Lynn, as you know, we have many guests who come through here. A lot of them are coaches. Many of them are authors. They always have something really cool to share that they've picked up along the way that becomes the basis for what it is that they're doing, why they're appearing on podcasts in the first place. And today's no exception. But I have to tell you, this is the first author who's come to us with a title that makes you think as you're reading the title, because there's so much packed into it. Before I even introduce who she is, I'm going to tell you what the title of the book is. The book is Take No Shit, Build Better Relationships Through Discovering, Creating, and Maintaining Healthy Boundaries in 3, sometimes 5, simple steps. I mean, that's just like, it's like all packed in there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, holy cow. We could take the entire show unpacking that title.
Yeah. I took an entire book unpacking the title.
Well, apparently you did. Yes. So I should probably bring you in so you can actually talk about that. So our guest today is Heather Claus. She is from North Carolina, and she's obviously the one who created this title and the book that went along with it. But it was very evident to me. You just shared that the title and subtitle with us here before we got started. And when I looked at it, I said to myself, this is somebody who's really thought through her topic. I mean, first of all, you have some balls to put all that on the cover. I mean, let's just give you some credit on that one. But I mean, you really worked through this topic, haven't you?
Yeah. Long story, much shorter. Last year in August, I decided to work on a passion project. And for the first couple of days, I kind of sat around twiddling my thumbs, waiting for the passion project to descend upon me. And, and then it did. Thank you. I realized that I've been talking about kind of writing a book about boundaries for a while. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to force myself to do this because, I tend to be a little flighty. I'm going to force myself to do this. I am going to write this book in front of an audience. And so I set up a quick little community and I invited about 125 people. And then I just started posting a chapter a day, every weekday, pretty much every weekday. And, talking with people, getting their questions. I interviewed a bunch of people to kind of like find out where they were and what their questions were about boundaries and where they were in their journey and that sort of thing. And I ended up writing 83 chapters and I had an outline for like another 30 or 40. And I stopped and I said, oof. I'm writing a textbook and I don't think anyone wants to read a textbook.
Yeah, that was my first thought. When you said 83, I said, okay, yeah. How many books in this encyclopedia?
Yeah. So I went back and I edited a lot. And I put it into those 3, sometimes 5 simple steps. I made that the structure of the book so that you can go through it step by step and, do your work. And, yeah, so I've thought about it probably a lot more than any normal human really thinks about boundaries. And luckily, I've also got all of that extra information that's on the cutting room floor right here to share with y'all. So,
which is very cool. We like that. But there's always a story behind anybody who writes a book. There's always a story behind why they ended up writing that book. So when I hear boundaries being the topic, I say to myself, okay, there was a boundaries issue going on somewhere in that background.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So at 19, I met the man who would eventually become my husband. And we were both fairly young. We were both fairly dumb in the ways of relationships. And he had an undiagnosed mental disorder, borderline personality disorder.
Oh,
and
wow.
He had been managing that through physical exertion. He was a physical trainer. And he'd been managing like the endorphins through, physical exertion and so on and so forth, had kind of, kept him mostly even keel until he injured himself a few years in. And we started the cycle of episodes and drinking and alcoholism became a part of the issue, and emotional abuse, all piled on top of the fact that we were both young, we were both kind of dumb, and we weren't really a good fit to begin with, despite the fact that we fell in love. So we, even if everything else had been perfect, we probably would have been harming each other just being together. We were great for a fling. We were not great for, a lifetime. And I do not blame him for what happened. I do not blame myself. I did, however, spend quite a bit of time looking over what happened in our relationship and what steps I could have taken at different points to prevent a lot of the harm that was done to me. And I realized that, the first time he took money out of my wallet without asking me, I could have done something then. By not doing something then, that encouraged the second time. And by not really, putting my foot down the second time, that made the third time that much more likely. And there we began a cycle of no consequences for craptaculous behavior. And honestly, I gave a lot of it back. Ultimately, passive aggressiveness and, emotional manipulation in order to get around the, yelling I thought might be coming and that sort of thing. I lied in the relationship because, I didn't want to deal with him blowing up about something that, I didn't think was a big deal. So I wasn't an angel. But once I got out of that, I, spent that time thinking about it and what could I do? And then I've spent the past 16 years, figuring out, writing about my relationships, writing about what I think about relationships. And, over that time, people have said to me, hey, this is really helpful. The way you have thought about it, the way you've broken these things out makes a difference to me. And I think that that's because I'm neurospicy myself. I have a low empathy disorder. And so I've had to kind of figure out how to be human in a way that most humans do naturally. So I can kind of look at what we all kind of take for granted and the socialization that we've been given. And since that never really worked very well for me, I can look at it and say, well, here's why it didn't work for me. And then other people are like, well, gosh, it's not actually working very well for me. So I look around and I see people who have, I call them craptaculous boundaries, right? I have a chapter in my book where I say, it is not your fault. You have craptaculous boundaries. We are raised to have poor boundaries. We are socialized to have almost zero boundaries. We are not modeled good boundaries in our family, in our friends, in the movies, in the books we read. And so it's no surprise that we're really bad at this.
Well, to be perfectly honest, it sounds like you and your ex kind of that you jumped into the deep end just because of what you guys were bringing to the relationship. I mean, borderline personality disorder. I'm no expert on it at all, but from what little I know, I mean, that's one hell of a disorder. That creates all kinds of crazy chaos. And that's just the starting point.
Yeah, absolutely. And we jumped in because, we were both young and we were both in love, right? And the whole love conquers all. And then once you get into that relationship, I don't know about y'all, but I was taught, I was socialized to believe that relationships, once you commit to each other, they should last forever, right? You should put everything in there. And I put everything in until I didn't have anything left. And that's when I said, I can't anymore. And again,
that's really a key element too. I mean, when we're talking boundaries, what you just said right there, that's really a key part. Realizing I just can't take this anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, even better if you can be like I am now and say, realize I'm not going to want to take that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I don't even want to put in the effort. People will be like, well, I deserve a chance. Yes, you deserve a lot of chances, but you don't deserve them from me. or to any specific person.
Yes.
What you
Yes.
deserve is you deserve to find your people.
Yeah.
Right? You know, and that's like, I'm not everybody's people either. And that's okay.
Right. Yeah. Being okay with who you are and with who the other person is. And if they don't really mix, then they don't really mix.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I talk a lot about, you know, I think y'all have probably seen out there very trendy right now, the idea of toxicity. They're a toxic person or, you know, narcissistic or whatever it is. And I kind of push back against that because really when it comes right down to it, unless you are a psychologist or psychiatrist or, you know, whatever, and you've actually interacted with somebody, you know, face to face and can literally diagnose them, I find it so much healthier and so much more helpful to, instead of trying to say this person is toxic and making them the big bad wolf, just say, not a good fit for me, right? They can be an amazing son. They can be an amazing dad. They could be an amazing partner to, you know, that next person that you probably hate in their life. But, but, you know, that doesn't make them toxic. It just means that the two of you didn't work together. And we've all been in relationships where they didn't bring out the best parts of us either. Right. Yeah. Every single one of us can look back and go, ooh, you know, if they wanted to call me toxic based on that thing alone, I could see it, but I'm not a toxic human. So grace to others as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it can easily be stated with a fair degree of accuracy that whenever someone points the finger at somebody else, they're usually talking about their own needs.
Absolutely. For sure. 100%. I mean, I can objectively say my ex-husband took money out of my wallet.
Sure.
Right? Like that's objective.
Right.
Why he did that is so much more complex. I mean, is it the addiction? Is it the mental illness? Was he being malicious? Like all of those things. And the way I look at it is why is kind of like, mental masturbation. Like it feels really good in the moment, but it doesn't actually get you anywhere. And
interesting way to describe it.
You know, we can't understand why other people do things 99.9% of the time. And we can't even understand why we do things, you know, 50 or more percent of the time. So better to just say, does this work for me? Is this a fit for me? And if the answer is no, it doesn't matter whether they're being malicious or malevolent or whether they're trying their best, because the answer is still no, that doesn't work for me. Yes, that is harming me. I should not have this in my life and I choose not to.
So let's tie in the whole idea of the finger pointing part, because the way I look at it now, I'm curious to know what your take is. You're the expert. Clearly you've worked through this whole thing in fine, minute detail, you know, but the way I'm looking at it is whenever there's the finger pointing going on, the finger pointing is kind of a way of deflecting. It's like, I don't want to have to deal with this myself. I'd rather have somebody else deal with this.
I think that there's a lot of that in it. And it's also, I look at boundaries and ethics as two sides of the same coin. And oftentimes, have you heard of covert contracts?
I have not. Jodie Lynn?
Okay, no. So covert contracts are really interesting. And I know that you have engaged in them because I have too. Everybody has. Covert contracts are those assumptions you make in a relationship where maybe you do something a little nice for them, expecting that they're going to do this other thing for you in the future, but you don't necessarily like have that conversation and get that consent, right? So that's a covert contract.
Okay.
Boundaries often work the same way, where somebody wants something like, I want my partner to go to the office Christmas party. Whereas honestly, as an adult human, I don't care whether my partner goes to the office Christmas party. My partner can go if my partner wants to go. My partner doesn't have to go. Like, he is not an extension of me, right? So, but let's say I want this. Let's say I feel like having my partner there is going to be, a bit of a boost to my, work standing, whatever. And I really want my partner there. My partner hates crowds. So I'm kind of like, okay, I'm going to come on, please. This is really important to me. Everybody else is going to be there, And my partner thinks, okay, you know what? I'm going to give her this so that the next time I stay out late with the guys drinking, if she brings that up, then I can come back with, yeah, well, you know how miserable I was at your office Christmas party? Right? So people will squash or let others trample their boundary as a sort of manipulation of or for future benefits. Yeah. And when you look at the codependency cycle, if you look at the empath narcissist cycles, if you look at, all passive aggressiveness, right? Sure. All of that is okay. I'm going to kind of let you get away with something, and you're going to know you're getting away with it, but you're going to think you're winning. And then later I'm going to do the same thing because we have been socialized to believe that relationships are either control or be controlled.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are people who take that to art form levels.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Whereas I am of the belief, in fact, the last thing I want is to control somebody. I don't like the word control when it comes from human to human. I mean, when it comes to, playing a video game, right? Yeah. The TV remote control, I'm fine with that. But when it comes human to human, I really look for collaboration. Mm-hmm. What do we both want out of this relationship? How can we put the things we want into the relationship, leave the things that we do not want out of the relationship? And how can we co-create our best lives ever together? The communal life that we live, and separately when we do things apart.
Yeah. I'm glad you included both of those elements too, because we tend to leave one or the other out.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's a balance, and it's going to be a different balance for everyone. Like I talk about, what I call the relationship sweet spot, which is a Venn diagram, right? And so you've got, your one circle is, this is what I want. You got your other circle, this is what you want. That overlap, that's the sweet spot. That's where you build your relationship. Everything outside of that, that's not in your relationship. It's still in your life, right? You want something. That's still in your life. Jodie Lynn, you want something. That's still in your life. But this podcast, this project, and other things that you work on together that you both want, that is the sweet spot of your relationship.
Right.
Right? But you don't have to bring in, your secret love of bottle cap collecting, because Jodie Lynn has no interest in that. And Jodie Lynn's, breeding, prize hedgehogs doesn't go into this whole thing because, ESPN.
That is great. Oh my goodness. All right, Jodie Lynn, I got to ask you. I mean, when you're hearing what she's talking about here, obviously boundaries, that's something we've all had to face at one point or another, particularly if we've had those crash and burn moments in our lives, which most of us have had. But where is your mind going as you're thinking about this?
Oh, I a lot of different places, I think. I think that it's a really complex conversation. Like you were saying, Heather, it's not just cut and dry, this person did this. And I think the more that I have developed and the more I've looked within, the more complex it's gotten. there's a lot of times where I didn't know why I was doing or thinking a certain thing or doing a certain thing until I like stopped and asked myself, like, why am I doing that? Why am I being an asshole? Or why am I like, expecting this or feel this pressure in this way? And we've talked about this lots on the show, but it's hilarious. You're talking about control. And the very first thing that I thought of was my ex-fiance before I met my current husband or whatever, right? The night that we got engaged, we were not my husband, but the ex. We were in Quebec City and we went to this, whatever. We're going to these different hotels and having a drink or whatever. And, he says to me, what do you think, what does marriage mean to you? And I was like, partnership and collaboration and creation. And, I'm saying a lot of the things that you were just saying, Heather. And I'm like, what about for you? And he like turned and he looked at me and he said, ownership.
Whoa.
And then 2 hours later, he asked me to marry him. And I still said yes at that point in time. But like, what a red flag that our value systems and obviously the boundaries that I had for things that I wanted in my life were non-existent and our values were not aligned. Like, thank God that crashed and burned. And actually it's a joke between my now husband and I, like whenever he's trying to be funny, he'll be like, what's marriage? Ownership. Seriously, who says that? It's just,
my partner and I say things like that all the time. Yeah. Like, what's that?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's yeah. And it's funny because, when you said that, I immediately thought, you know what? I know some people that would get along fabulously with him. Because, no, seriously, like,
I love it.
In my bio,
seriously, I want to know how that relationship actually works. You got two people who want ownership.
No. He believes that marriage equals ownership. The other person might also believe it, but then if all they have to agree on is who's doing the owning, right? Like, so.
That to me is a big assumption.
You never know, because I've engaged in and taught alternative lifestyles all across the country and around the world. And some people, rather than, fuss and fight at each other over equality and why haven't you done this? Well, you were going to do it and whatever. Some people just set all that aside and go for a power exchange relationship, right? Mm-hmm. Where one person takes the bulk of the responsibility for the relationship and the other person gives up their power in exchange for that responsibility, and often does like the bulk of like the housework and so on. And they agree upon it. The key though, like Jodie Lynn said, Jodie Lynn and this ex were not compatible.
No.
The key is that the people who do this, they both want that and they negotiate it and they choose it for themselves together, right? Like, not unlike if, Walt, you and I decided to, climb Mount Everest, right? Like, if that's something that we want to do, no matter how crazy it is to anyone else, and we collaborate on it and we negotiate who's going to be in charge of the food and who's going to be carrying, the bed pack and everything like that, that's fine because we're making it work for both of us. So yeah, and that's boundaries, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you got two people who are ownership driven, you better have pretty damn good boundaries because you're going to be fighting tooth and nail every step of the way if you don't.
Yeah, there are some people who feel that like there's like a kind of mutual ownership, and then that's also okay, right? Like, again, as long as it is figured out. Even people who disagree on a lot of fundamentals can have a successful relationship when they understand each other and they also give each other the right and the space to disagree, right? And to do the things that like not go into the, the office party, well, I don't want to go to your office Christmas party because I'm Jewish, right? Like, okay, that is absolutely, you're right. things like this. Like we all have differences of opinion, and what you want to do and what I want to do does not have to be the same thing in order for us to value what each other brings to the table.
Mm-hmm. And I like, Heather, how you talked about not labeling somebody as like toxic or narcissistic or like bad, just not for me. Right. I can get behind that because I have been that, horrible person in the relationship. Literally dated a guy. I backed into his car and took his front bumper off of his car. And I was such an asshole at that time in my life that I literally took the front bumper of his car, went back into my house, went into the bedroom, slammed it on the floor, and called him an asshole. I backed into his car. Like, just obviously, we've all done dumb stuff in our lives. There's been a person that we didn't want to be, and it doesn't mean that you're all bad. And perhaps that person brought a little bit of that out in you, but you're just not a good fit, and that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's huge. I have this joke that it's like, the brain is an amazing organ. It works 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, every moment of your life until you fall in love.
Interesting observation.
And then it just dribbles right out the ears, right? Like you're done for at that point. Which, I mean, obviously it is a joke because I do not believe that. I believe that you can actually, if you set good boundaries, you can actually determine who you're willing to fall in love with. Mm-hmm. That said, again, we are socialized to fall in love. Like we just sort of tripped over a painted line and stumbled into love and had like no control over the situation. And then, if we get upset, then, they get to stand outside our room holding a boombox up high, winning our love back with some sort of stupid stalky gesture or whatever it is. And this is what we believe love is supposed to be, right? Like we don't, there aren't a whole lot of movies or books or whatever that we want to watch or read that show us real life because we're trying to escape real life by reading and watching movies. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's frustrating.
I also think that in our society, we're not taught to spend a lot of time with ourselves, learning about what is it that I truly do want, what makes me happy, and where is that line for myself, and being okay with drawing that line. Because I think the other side of boundaries is that, pressure or guilt that is often felt with setting that standard, like, no, this isn't okay with me, and being okay saying that, and whatever result may result in you saying it.
Why you got to rip my heart out like that?
Yeah.
I thought you really loved me. Like
right. Emotional manipulation comes right out there.
So boundaries is a deep topic, right? Like you can get super deep and touch on trauma and past relationships and all sorts of things. So when I wrote this book, one of the things I tried to do is I tried to make it fun. I write like I talk. So, I've actually had, my book just came out 7 days ago as of this recording.
Wow.
So,
congratulations.
Thank you. And I've gotten 2 reviews on Amazon, and one said that they felt like I was talking to them like a friend.
Nice.
And the other one said that it was as fun as like searching for memes on the internet, as funny as a comedy show. And so I've actually got illustrations throughout the book. And one of the illustrations is this like beautiful, feminine hand holding a human heart. And it's like, why would you rip my heart out like this? The idea that people can hand us guilt or try to make us feel shame for setting boundaries is incredibly entrenched in our society. Like it's okay for people. What do you mean? Jodie Lynn, you said you'd go out to dinner with me tonight. Like, what do you mean you're just not feeling up to it? Like, you said you would. Work can wait tomorrow. Like, you don't have to get in early. Like, come on. You promised. Like, I need you to go out with me. Come on. Like, seriously, are we adults or are we like 5-year-olds?
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's.
Well, it depends which mood we're in, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously.
It depends on whether, you know, we care about their boundaries as much as we care about our own.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, we forget about that.
Too. Like, we create all of these meanings of like, oh, well, you know, I just got to do it this one time because it means so much to them. And if I don't, then I mean, you know, they're going to be upset with me and it's going to mean that I don't love them and blah, blah, blah. Like all of these things, this inner dialogue that we have with ourselves that we never really say out loud.
And we often don't even realize that we're having that dialogue, right? It's just all of a sudden we just feel so worn down and, you know, our brain defaults to the pattern of, okay, I'm going to do it. Right? And
let's get through it.
Yeah, it's challenging for sure. And it's not our fault that we have these terrible boundaries. And so earlier, you mentioned the subtitle, which talked about the just 3, sometimes 5 simple steps. So the steps are, step 1 is set your boundary. Step 2 is say your boundary. Step 3 is review. Step 4 is repeat it. That's an optional one. And step 5 is change. That's an optional one. So in step 1, and this is, you know, for you, Jodie Lynn, where you were saying, you know, sometimes we don't even know. In step 1, I go through the 6 main types of boundaries, and each one is broken down into different parts. And there are questions to ask yourself about like how you feel about emotional boundaries, material boundaries, intellectual boundaries, sexual boundaries, physical boundaries, and time boundaries. And so like there are questions to ask yourself to get yourself learning more about boundaries. And then we also have an app, a daily boundaries app that's absolutely free. And every single day it gives you one question to ask yourself. And then you can journal, either journal privately, or you can journal and share that with others in the feed and then see what they journal and like learn and inspire and so on and so forth. And that's just setting your boundaries for yourself, right? Knowing who you are and what your boundaries are. And then step 2 is, of course, speaking those boundaries to whomever needs to know. Step 3 is reviewing how that went. How did it go? The AAR, after action report. You know, did they actually say, oh yeah, you know what? You have a right to that boundary. I'm super sorry. Didn't mean it, or whatever it is. Did they say, I'm going to do my best? Or in some cases, even when they mean the best, they might say, that's not something I can do. Right. And if we need to like part as a result, if we're not going to be a fit as a result, that's okay. But my boundaries prevent that from being something I can offer you. So then, you know, you're reviewing it. How did that go? And in some cases it didn't go at all. So you think, okay, maybe I need to repeat it. That's step 4. That's optional. If it all went well in step 1, 2, and 3, you don't need to do step 4, right? But if you need to do step 4, that's repeating it. Maybe the first time you told them they weren't really present. Maybe you need to explain what this boundary means to you. Or maybe they just didn't understand what you meant. Or some boundaries take a lot of change over time, right? You just want to like, you know, give that a little boost. And then the 5th step is if that repeat it still doesn't do what you need to do, then change. Change what you're willing to accept. In some cases, it's things like, I really need them to not be smacking their gum when I'm trying to write a book. And sometimes you realize that you could be writing a book with them smacking their gum next to you, or you could be writing a book single. And you'd rather write a book with them smacking their gum next to you. Not that my partner smacks his gum, but throughout the book, one of the things that I do is I have these little like brackets, fill in the blank. And when I give examples, sometimes I give examples like, competitive, chinchilla racing or, smacking their gum while you write a book. And the idea is that if it's in brackets in the book, then you get to fill in whatever fits best there. And it doesn't just say fill in the blank, because fill in the blank is boring and lazy, right? Like, okay, I can just say, well, pretend you were saying fill in the blank. Like, how fun is that for a book?
I like the chinchilla races and all the things you come up with so far. It's hilarious.
So
I didn't even know chinchillas raced. I mean, that's news to me. I like that.
How do you get them to race?
I don't know.
Very, very
they're rabbits,
right?
I don't know that I've seen a chinchilla. I'm sorry.
I love chinchillas. I used to raise chinchillas. So very brief period of my teenage life. I raised mice and hamsters and gerbils and chinchillas and sold them to the pet store for spending cash because I hated paper routes. So there you go.
That's smart.
Yeah. So you can change what you're willing to accept, right? Or you can change your relationship, your situation. And so there's a whole chapter on that or a whole section on that. And then there's a section on troubleshooting, including a chapter, why didn't you take no for an answer? Right. So gently turning it around and saying, okay, we're talking about your boundaries, but let's talk a little bit about other people's boundaries and how you haven't always honored those. And let's be honest with ourselves. I mean, it's a book, right? Like, I don't know what's actually going through your head. So you're not actually, fessing to me. But I know we've all done it. So a gentle call out, amongst other things is, I think, important there as well.
Well, I think it's fair because very often, well, I'll even go so far as to say 99% of the time when we're thinking about boundaries, we're thinking about our own.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And the thing is, I believe, I have not done any scientific studies on this, but in my coaching and talking with people, I've done several hundred interviews about boundaries over the past year. And in talking with people, what I have found is that when people begin to consciously pay attention to other people's boundaries and radically validate them and honor them, it's so much easier for them to start standing up for their own. It doesn't work quite as well in the other direction, right? Because we kind of always feel like we're standing up for our boundaries, like we're always pushing to get what we want and whatever. But it's only when we start really realizing how individual other humans are in our life and that they have a right to spend time with us or not as they see fit. And honestly, to turn it to the point where I only want people in my life who are thrilled to be spending time with me, who want to do the things with me that they do with me. I don't ever want to learn that, one of my friends didn't really want to do X, Y, Z with me and they did it anyway because they thought I'd be upset, right? Like that would hurt my feelings.
Well, that ties into something that I think anybody can identify with, which is you're involved, whether it's a primary relationship or any kind of relationship. It could be work related. It could be school. It could be anything. Sibling. When you're dealing with a relationship where the other person in the relationship isn't cluing you in on what the boundary is.
Yes. Right. Just like that. And then you think, okay, so when because we've all done this too. We've stomped our own boundary before somebody gets a chance to.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because we're afraid that if we uphold the boundary, they won't like us. So we just let it slide, right? And then if we really think about this, because I'm guessing that 98% of the people who will listen to this, because I believe this is true of the general population, 98% of the people who listen to this are good people. right? We consider ourselves good humans.
Yeah,
and if
sure.
we are good humans and we find out that somebody did something they were uncomfortable with or let something slide that they didn't like or that hurt them or that hurt their feelings because they were afraid we wouldn't like them. Like just thinking about that makes my heart hurt. Right? Like that, like the idea that somebody would be like, well, you called me by this nickname or you used the wrong pronouns or whatever it is. And that hurt my feelings, but I didn't speak up because I didn't want you to not like me. And you're like, and I've been calling you Stacy instead, or I've been calling you Stace instead of Stacy for like 3 months now. And you hate that? Like dagger to the heart, right? So if we think about how we honor other people in our lives, how do we show them that we trust them and that we care about them? It's also by maintaining our boundaries and giving them the opportunity to rise to be the person that we hope they are, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I often like to say the most important thing to understand about a relationship is what the root of the word is, which is relate. Relating is about talking and listening. If you're not talking and listening, you don't have a relationship.
Interesting point there. So my next book, which I've already started outlining.
Oh, here we go. The first one's been out 7 days. Before this, I was a prolific content creator in other channels. So like I can't not be doing things. Got it.
So it's actions speak louder than words, or do they? How we kill our relationships by talking too much. So the idea of, we often think when we talk about communication, we often focus specifically on talking when things go cattywampus, right? Versus all the things we do that are not necessarily just words every moment of our interactions with each other. So very excited about that one because it will also be about here's how to use words. I mean, in this book, step 2, say it, is an entire section on master these phrases. Here's how you say this without like being defensive or offensive or whatever. But also the better idea is to embody your space, embody your boundaries in every single thing that you do so you don't constantly have to talk about them.
I don't know. I have mixed feelings about that, to be honest. I'm curious to know more about the thought. Well, the reason I have mixed feelings is I'm recently divorced. I was divorced this past winter. The relationship broke up actually about almost exactly a year ago, about a week from now. And when the relationship ended, I received a note from my ex that basically outlined a few, not all, of the reasons why she wanted to end the relationship. And then I learned later what the other reasons were. And except for one, none of them have been discussed. Yeah.
And so that, though, that goes back to our covert contracts that we were talking about, right? Okay. So I'm not saying that you don't ever talk. What I'm saying is like, you talk about the important things. You negotiate ahead of time so that you don't fight a million times later, right? Like it's, the thing is that like we get into these relationships and we think, okay, you're like, at least your ex, Jodie Lynn, at least your ex said, what is marriage to you? Right? You had warning. You just chose to
you had warning.
But a lot of that could have just, marriage to many people is a covert contract. This person goes in thinking this is going to be, you know, family picnics and kids and, you know, PTA for the rest of our life. And the other one goes in thinking, you know, this is going to be an adventure and we're going to travel and we're going to see the world together. Right. And they can't figure out why over the years they grow apart. It's because they never really communicated to begin with. They kept giving in on their own boundaries to serve the relationship. And I feel it should be the opposite. The relationship should be serving the individuals. So, Walt, yes, obviously there were talks you should have had.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's a given. Yeah.
No doubt. You know, I would never, ever argue against that. I would also say that I'm guessing that there was a lot of miscommunication through the not words. That
well, I'm wondering about something like that because we were together 23 years. The first 20 or so were really, really good. It started to fall apart the last few years, and those last few years.
It could also be, you know, there's so much life change, right? Like, you know, kids leaving the nest, and all of a sudden you realize that the one thing that kept you together is not there anymore. You know, that happens to people as well. I mean, I deal with people from all different, parts of their lives and so on and so forth. But yeah, I mean, it's what do we do on a daily basis? You guys, you two know about John Gottman? He did these studies in New York City where he filmed couples interacting and like talked with them and so on and so forth. And then he could predict successfully with like a 98% success rate.
Oh, I remember this.
Who would be together 6 years later, who would be happy, who would be broken up. And one of the things that helped predict that was the not just word language between the two of them, the bids for attention and the turning toward or turning away from that bid. So if you're sitting on the couch, as I often do, reading a book and your partner is watching TV and your toes are closed. So you kind of like bury your toes under their thigh, right? So you're like kind of pointing out and do they kind of swat you and like make you go away because you're invading their space? Do they completely ignore you because they're engrossed in sports ball? Yay, sports ball. Or do they, just gently reach over and like, rub your legs, while you're reading and they're watching sports ball, right? The bid for attention. How do we engage with each other when we don't have to say words? How do we say the right words when we need to say them so that we can avoid all of this like busy talk that, when people say, oh, I'm having troubles in my relationship, and people say, well, you've got to talk. And then you get together and you have those marathon sessions until like 3:00 in the morning where you're both just freaking exhausted and you're like, okay, whatever. Right. And you just fall asleep because, boundaries. That is not something I'm ever willing to do again.
Okay, I get that. Yeah.
I like going to bed between like 9 and 10 p.m. and having a nice schedule. I get up early, 3 a.m. crying sessions. Not my cup of tea.
No. It doesn't do a whole lot for the sleep cycle either.
No.
Understandable. Yeah. Boy, I mean, just in the short amount of time we're looking at this, and we've been doing it for 48 minutes, it reinforces just how big of a topic this is. No wonder you had 80. I'm surprised you didn't have more than 83 chapters. I'm surprised you didn't have like 830, to be honest.
Yeah, how did you whittle it down to 3, maybe 5 steps?
So the way I looked at it was this. I figured out, okay, what are the most important steps, right? And I broke those out. And then I said, what is the critical information that I want anyone to be able to access by, holding this digital copy of a book, listening to the audio, or, holding the print version. The audio and print version will be out in late October if all goes well. So that was the key. And then I started looking at it and saying, okay, this, like, for example, I had essentially an entire section, not just a chapter, but a section written on gaslighting, manipulation, and scunnery of the worst sorts. And
scunnery. Ooh, I love that word.
Looked that out. And I made it into an online I made it into a webinar and online presentation that goes into the book, the online errata, extras for the book. Like I put it in there, and it might even become like one of those, like, those little mini books you can get on Amazon for like, $4.99 or whatever. It might become something like that. Same thing. Lying. Like I had an entire section on setting boundaries around lying, because it's not about if they lie. It's about when they lie. Humans lie, right? Like you're never going to have a long-term relationship without any lies. It is not possible. So when, not if, they lie, why people lie, what kind of lies they tell, and how to set boundaries around that, right? That also came out and has become, like a little video chit chat talk about an hour that like, okay, now other people are going to get this if they, sign up for book updates. That's the type of thing. And then I don't know if y'all checked it out when I had approached you, but one of the things I have in my profile and that I often send in my messages is, if you want to talk about boundaries without saying, let's talk boundaries, I have like 50 different ideas on, relationships, money, physical fitness, and so on and so forth, all taken from bits and bobs of extra chapters saying, hey, if you want to talk about something that's not in my book, but still related to boundaries, we can set an entirely like specific topic just for you.
Oh, you could do an entire podcast for the next 10 years on the topic and not run out of topics.
Yeah. But then I'll be on to communication, and after that,
it'll be like the 10th book.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
This is one of those topics that it has its own echo chamber. It just goes on and on and on. And
on. Because everybody can say, oh, and then.
And then, yes. That reminds me of.
And I do that in the book. Like, so the book itself is about 78,000 words. I guess the average for a self-help book, which I guess is what this is around 40 to 50,000. So I still had a little bit extra in there. But I'd like to say that those extras are the fun bits. Those are like the examples. There's an entire section on having a discussion, like here's what was said, and here's the back and forth, and then here's the review. Here's how we, felt it went, type of things, just to give you examples of these things. And there's also a lot of like silly stories. Like there's the story of the coffee fairy. And then there's the story of, why do you always overthink things? Why do you always overfeel things? And then, there's the story of, you have a really great, creativity factor, but I'm not going to do that with you because you're not good enough at hiding the bodies, right? Like, so, how we can validate people and still not agree with them.
That's an interesting form of validation. I've never heard that one before.
Well, that sounds like a lot of fun. It's really creative, and I don't think we could pull it off without bail money. So not a good idea, right? Like,
I'm not sure we can pull it off with bail money, to be perfectly honest.
Fair, right? And boundaries is such a deep topic. But so I feel like putting in extras so that we can have some fun with it. And there's a lot of quotes in there from different people talking about things. One of them that I really enjoy that I actually have it on the back cover of my print design. The more severe the dysfunction you experienced growing up, the more difficult boundaries are for you. It's David Earl.
Yeah.
And that kind of sums it all up. Like, and even if you didn't experience major dysfunction, once you got out of your family home and you got into your first relationship, your boundaries immediately started getting stomped, right? Like, because that's what kids do to each other, right? We try to get our way.
Mhm.
And I guess that's, I just sort of had an epiphany here. I guess that's sort of like the difference between what I see as my early relationships and now what I see as my real adult relationship. And that is, in my early relationships, it was like I was trying to get my way, right? Like I was constantly trying to get them to do things my way. I had an idea of what a husband should be like. I had an idea of, what a partner should be like, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And now my relationships are built around my way to support and validate and celebrate my way and also my partner's way. Right. So we don't have to try to force each other to do things. We can just simply say, hey, you know what I'd really like in this relationship? I would like more cat. Right. Like, and okay, so I don't want more cat. I want more dog. Ooh, dog. We're actually having this discussion right now. So funny story. I've had dogs for years. For 22 years, I was an enthusiastic amateur dog trainer. I did competition.
Oh, wow.
I did show. Like, I love dogs. I have big dogs. I had Dogo Argentinos, which are fairly rare. And so I said to my partner not too long ago, maybe about a year ago, I was going to be going through some surgeries, and I decided that, one of my hobbies during these surgeries was going to be dog. I have puppy fever. I miss having a dog. We have a cat. I miss having a dog. So I said to him, I want a dog. And he's like, I have had trauma with dogs. He got a dog. You know how like people get dogs when they're young adults because their parents had dogs. So they think they know how to handle a dog, but they don't know how to handle a dog. Mm-hmm. He had trauma. Like he got the most active, crazy dog ever. And like, had no idea. So I decided that I want miniature bull terrier because we live in a condo downtown. I don't need a gigantic dog. He's decided, his parents had Dobermans when he was young. He wanted Dobermans.
Oh boy.
So we would send each other Instagram videos. So he sends me an Instagram video of a bull terrier that has eaten its way through the couch cushion and laying in the mess. And I send him a video of a Doberman like running and jumping over a couch and landing on the glass coffee table. And so we're having like these little dog wars, right? Like, and I have told him, and I will tell you because this sounds like we're all being very manipulative, but we're not. It's all in good fun. I have told him over and over and over again, I will never get a dog until he's like, I absolutely want a dog, right? Like I am ready. This is something I'm going to commit to. But until then, we're going to bombard each other with like, look how awesome my breed is and how terrible yours is. And, vice versa. And we're just like, and then every once in a while he throws in an Australian cattle dog as a mixer-upper, which is probably the most difficult dog in the entire world to train. But yet, he loves the way they look. So, of course, that's what he's going to throw at me. And so, again, this is one way that we can negotiate boundaries. We don't have to, like, constantly talk to each other about dogs when we can simply send memes and videos at each other and make each other laugh while we try to figure out whether or not we could fit a dog into our lives.
This is like the negotiation leading up to the negotiation is what this really is.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh my God. I'm exhausted thinking about it.
It's so much fun. It's just so silly, right?
Oh, wow. Well, I knew we weren't going to be able to do justice to this in an hour. And we haven't, but we've done pretty well considering.
I think we've covered a lot of topics.
Yeah. Well, I think your 3, sometimes 5 steps certainly helps. It provides a context, right?
It does.
Like a framework to work within. And when you're within the framework, you may not be able to solve all of humanity's problems, but you can actually figure out a few of your own.
I'm a huge fan of systems. huge. Because if you can break things down into a few steps that people can understand, it's so much easier for them to take action, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the key for me. Is I really believe the world, and I'm not a huge woo-woo person, but I really, really believe the world would be a better place if more people had more boundaries and were able to be their most authentic selves. Like happier in relationships, able to negotiate for what they want, to stop begging for what they like want and need in a relationship from people who just don't give a fudge, right? Like, they just set those boundaries, be that amazing, brilliant person that sparkles as, brightly as you want, and draw the people who want that person to you instead of making yourself less for the people who demand that you be not all that.
Jodie Lynn, you and I both know when we do these shows, very, very many times I've said, wow, there's so many different directions I could go on this, right? And, I can think of, 20 questions to go. Actually, I have to say this one's an exception because it's not 20 questions. It's about 2,000.
Right. Yeah.
Right? It's like it's like a boundary. You have to kind of like just draw a line at some point and say, okay, we're done.
We're going to be here for 3 days.
Exactly. Yeah.
We're gonna workshop this. Okay.
Yeah, right.
Gather around.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, I guess that's what boundaries as a topic does. It kind of gets you thinking and you start to realize there's a lot. There's a lot to cover here. Yeah, there really is. But thank you for helping to cover all that. Now the book once again is called Take No Shit, subtitled Build Better Relationships Through Discovering, Creating, and Maintaining Healthy Boundaries in 3, sometimes 5, simple steps. I presume it's on Amazon. I presume it's anywhere online that you can buy a book.
It's on Amazon right now. For the first 90 days,
oh, okay. Just Amazon for 90 days. Okay.
Very, very worth my while. And then after that, it will be spread around the internet far and wide.
Good strategy. I like that.
You can actually get to it through my.curiouser.life. That way, if you're on Amazon US or Amazon UK or Australia or whatever, I have links to all of those.
Good move. Okay. So we'll make sure we'll include that in the show notes so people can find it the easy way instead of having to go, where is this thing? I can't find the darn thing. Yeah. We'll make it easy. One of the things though that I need to ask you is, I get the feeling, particularly from the way that you did the book, you told us a story about how you wrote one chapter at a time, you shared it with the community and so forth. I get the feeling you like interacting with that community. Is that still true?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I love interacting. I'm still doing boundaries interviews. And I'm taking some of those and actually pulling out some of the conversations, anonymizing them, and then working with them. I'll be putting those out on social media so other people will be able to hear some of the conversations that I've had with people about boundaries.
Okay, so somebody listening to the show wants to have a little conversation. How do they reach out and find you?
So my.curiouser.life has the book, a link to the app, a link to my Take No Shit workshop, and it also has information on coaching. So you can reach out and coach with me if you are looking to, build that most brilliant life for yourself and, possibly your partner if you're partnered up.
So I should have said 2,100 questions because we didn't even touch on the coaching piece. I mean,
it's pretty much just what I've been doing here, only tailored to whomever. Like they say, I want more of this in my life, or I want less of that in my life. And we say, okay, let's build a plan. So let me be clear. I am not a therapist. I never pretend to be a therapist. In fact, most of the people I coach also go to therapy. So to me, therapy is like getting your past figured out and like getting some of those wounds healed. Coaching, from my perspective, is what is our goal and how do I give you actionable steps to take you there? And we record our sessions so that some of my coaching clients actually share our sessions or parts of our sessions with their therapists so that their therapists know kind of what they're. And one of my clients said to me last week, oh my gosh, it was so hilarious. I was like, when I get you to write a testimonial for me, I want that in there. He said, so I went to my therapist the other day, and I haven't really been doing much therapy lately because, you know, I've been doing this, I've been focused, but I've been staying on his book. So every 6 weeks I go and see him. And since the last 6 weeks, he says, wow, you've come a long way in a really short time. And I'm like, yes.
Yeah, that's exactly the kind of result. Well, Jodie Lynn's a coach. I mean, that's what you look for, right, Jodie Lynn, when you get that kind of growth going on?
Oh, yeah, that's some good stuff.
It's fabulous stuff. One other thing I need to tell you, this is a thing that I've been doing for the last year and a half, almost 2 years now. I noticed a number of years ago that we as a society have now gotten to the point in this 21st century with the internet and all the technology and so forth, that since we're all now content creators, particularly those of us who have found things that are important to us and we're putting it out there, we're trying to help people. A lot of people, they consume our stuff. We don't even know about it. We help them in ways that we've never heard about. You know, we never do hear about it, and we never get any credit for it. And I said, wait a minute, we should be getting credit for that. So I like to say, on behalf of those people that you've never met and that you've never seen, that you've been putting the content out to and they've been consuming it and getting help from it, on their behalf, I want to thank you for what you've been doing, because you are making a difference in this world.
Thank you.
Because I think that's really important. Yeah.
I think as a content creator and as a content consumer, I do believe in, you know, thanking people for what they do and in letting people know when they make a difference. And especially for me, you know, like reaching out and saying, hey, that's brilliant. You did a great job there. So, you know, absolutely. And thank you. Obviously, thank you for having me on. This has just been so much fun.
We love it too. And Jodie Lynn, you know where I'm coming next, or where I'm coming last. It's always, because you'll find out in a minute, Heather, how good Jodie Lynn really is. But she is like excellent at this. I always ask the same question. It's always asked a little bit differently, but it's the same question. So Jodie Lynn, what's the one thing that you're focused on that's the takeaway we should be taking away from today's conversation?
The one takeaway that I would want everybody to focus on is that boundaries will change your life and all of your relationships. So they're not a bad thing or a scary thing, and they're not a good or bad. They just can be simply what you need in your life. And that's a beautiful thing. And when you're honoring other people's boundaries and your own, you get to create the life that you've always wanted to create. So we need to do more of it as a world. And like Heather said, I will echo, we'll watch the world change when we do.
What did I tell you, Heather? I mean, is she good or is she good? I mean, seriously.
Absolutely. For sure.
Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it very, very much. Thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.